Do you keep going? Do you keep working through the exhaustion? Do you keep working through the injury and just hope that it sorts itself out because I've got to accomplish my goal. I've got to be that athlete that I want to be. I've got to keep pushing. Because that's what all the big players do. They keep pushing. But do you do that when you're exhausted, like so exhausted, fatigued, and you feel like you just can't function? You're walking around like a zombie. Do you do that when you're injured? You just keep pushing through. Oh no, it's okay. I'll just work through the injury. Welcome to the Tiffany Micah podcast. What we do here is build the strength and courage in you to accomplish your big dreams and goals in your sport. No longer will you feel limited. You won't feel you're not good enough. You won't question whether you will make it. Those doubts will disappear because you will have the competitive edge over your opponents and leave them in your wake. And the bonus is others will notice. Listen up and take notes because I will show you exactly how to do it. Hey there, this is Tiff from the Tiffany Micah podcast and welcome to today's episode. Well, what we're going to be talking about today is something that comes up constantly. And what I've noticed is I've had a number of conversations with athletes about this recently. It keeps coming up. And that's why I want to talk about it today. I did do an episode about my own experience with regards to burnout. I think it was about mid last year, about what the process was that I always hit burnout. But I want to talk to you about it more from where I feel that you may be right now. Because my experience in burnout throughout the years, not only in sport, but in everything that I do, had occurred, around about somewhere between the 6-week, 8-week period, work my butt off, hit burnout. Takes time to recover, work my butt off, hit burnout. And it was a reoccurring pattern. And I just want to make sure that we're tackling this issue because this is going to keep coming up for you unless you know how to deal with it. So this is what I see the process at the moment with a lot of athletes is they're working their butt off, they're training and they're practicing really hard and they're doing them, more hours in the gym, they're doing more hours out on the field or the court, the pitch, the pool, wherever their sport is, and they just work and train. But what also happens, and you got to do that, right, to a point, right? But what also happens is there's no downtime. They just keep grinding it out. They keep pursuing until they hit that point. They keep pushing until they hit that point, and that point could be things like exhaustion, so physical exhaustion, mental exhaustion. Now, I find that those two actually intercorrelate. So they work as a unit. If you're physically exhausted, you're going to be mentally exhausted as well. But also that point could be injury as well. And I find that what happens with burnout is it's usually for those two reasons. Is one is either exhaustion, or the second one is either they've had an injury, like an injury's occurred from what's been going on. So let's look at why what happens actually when exhaustion occurs. So when exhaustion occurs, our energy levels are depleted, aren't they? We have no strength. We've lost our strength. We've lost our stamina, and we feel incredibly fatigued, like just so fatigued. And then if we look at like when an injury occurs, what happens then? Well, you can't train at the intensity that you were training before, can you? And the reason that injuries occur is for a few reasons. So one is because you're not performing the technique correctly. So it's really important to make sure that you're performing the technique correctly. Second thing is, you're absolutely exhausted, you're tired, and you're not paying attention, right? So you're actually losing focus, losing the attention that you actually need to give when you're performing technique, strength, fitness, whatever it is that you're currently working on in your sport. It could also be overload, so you've overtrained. It could be the repetition of those movements and you've worn out the muscles. So whether you've hit exhaustion or whether you've hit injury, then there's a burnout, isn't it? So the question then becomes like, do you keep going? Do you keep working through the exhaustion? Do you keep working through the injury and just hope that it sorts itself out because I've got to accomplish my goal. I've got to be that athlete that I want to be. I've got to keep pushing. Because that's what all the big players do. They keep pushing. But do you do that when you're exhausted, like so exhausted, fatigued, and you feel like you just can't function? You're walking around like a zombie. Do you do that when you're injured? Do you just keep pushing through? Oh no, it's okay. I'll just work through the injury. You don't do that. Because it won't sort itself out. What will happen if you keep doing what you're doing, you keep grinding it out, and you keep trying to work through that exhaustion to get to the other side, you keep working through that injury to see if you can get to the other side, it'll just get worse. It will. It'll just get worse. And there's this saying, I really love this saying, feather, brick, truck. And I read this in a book that was written by a lady from New Zealand. It was called, I think it was called Healing with Horses. And it was a really good book because it's not only how to communicate better and like how to learn how to communicate with people better, but you're actually doing that through the horse, like learning to communicate with a horse. So if the horse picks up poor energy from you, it won't respond and so on. So she talks a lot about that through the book. But what I loved about the feather brick truck was that she talked a lot about burnout and why burnout occurs. And she was talking about this feather brick truck because she's a high achiever as well. And she kept ignoring the signs. She kept ignoring the warning signs. So she ended up having all sorts of injuries, illnesses, all of that kind of thing because she kept trying to push through when she was already exhausted and she was already injured. There's a clue there. So feather, what does feather mean? Well, really a feather is like it's a little niggle. It's a bit annoying. Not enough to stop you, but it's annoying, right? You're aware of it. A brick is like a slight injury, something that's actually going to slow you down, something where you're starting to feel physically tired, you're starting to feel mentally tired. There's something going on. So it's at a bit deeper level than the feather, obviously, because you've just been hit by a brick. Can you imagine being hit by a brick in the head? Being hit in the head with a feather is like a little flutter, isn't it? Imagine getting hit in the head by a brick. Woof. But then the truck, what does the truck symbolize? Full-on injury, full-on exhaustion, full-on illness. It actually stops you in your tracks. Can you imagine getting hit by a truck? Bye-bye, right? But you don't want to get to that point. So if you're ignoring those warning signs that are already occurring, the feather, and you keep trying to work through the feather, you're going to get hit by a brick at some point. And if you keep trying to work through that brick, you're going to get hit by a truck. Because if you get hit by a truck, it's going to stop you in your tracks, isn't it? And recovery time could take anything from, weeks to many months, possibly years, or maybe even end your career that you've just begun. So we don't want to get to that point. We don't want to get to that point. Right? I've had warning signs. I've had a twisted pelvis and so on. And even when I got hit by a feather, I was still having treatment. But nothing was changing. I got hit by a brick and I got hit by a truck. Debilitating. I thought that I'd even need a hip replacement. It was that bad. And it was just a twisted pelvis. I didn't know. The expert that I was seeing was not solving that problem. I went and got advice, a second opinion from someone else. Changed my life, right? But I know what it's like to have a full-on injury. You can't function. You can't sleep properly. You can't function properly throughout the day. It's a very big struggle. And I want you to be thinking about this, is because as an athlete, whatever level athlete you are right now, it's not about the many hours that you put in that's actually going to give you the breakthrough. And that was the big thing that I used to think it was like that too. It was, I've just got to keep grinding it out more. Tennis academy I went to, 6 hours of full-on squad training. I'd do 2 hours before that, 2 hours after that. So it was at least 10 hours a day of physical training. Got to keep working harder. It's going to be the thing that gives me the breakthrough. But it's not that. It's not the many hours that you're doing. It's the quality of practice that you're doing. It's the quality of training that you're doing. It's the strategies that you're putting in place. That is the key. That is the key to it. So you're like, okay, Tiff, thank you. That's great. But what are some of the things that I could do to stop the burnout? Because I don't want that burnout to keep happening. Right? I'm sure that's the question that you're asking me. So I'm going to take you through a few things in what we can actually work on. Okay? So the number one is I want you to actually step back and take an aerial view of your life and your sport, like everything. I did this the other day. I stepped back and I actually looked at what was going on in my business. Actually, my life, I've got that all sorted out, but in my business, it's not quite working the way that I want it to yet. Okay, I took a step back. Let's have an aerial view of actually what's going on, because you need to know what's going on a daily basis. All right, you actually need to know what's functioning well, what's not functioning well. So what you want to do here is you want to ask the question for each action that you're doing on a daily basis. So you want to be asking this question is this getting me closer to accomplishing my goals, this particular action that you're doing? So all the training that you're doing, all the practice that you're doing, the food that you eat, the things that you're studying in order to get that edge, are they the things that are going to get you closer to accomplishing your goals? Are they the actions that are going to get you closer to accomplishing your goals? Because if you're saying yes, they are, then great. You know what's working, and then you've just got to keep doing that process. Okay? But if you say no, what I'm actually doing is not getting me to closer to accomplishing my goals, then this is good, because then you have identified what's not working. Right? We're just getting an aerial view, because we've actually got to step back and actually have a look and see what's going on. So that's the first step. Take an aerial view of your life and your sport. Number two, for the actions that you have identified as a no, those actions that are not working, what do you need to do to change it? So you've got to ask that question, what do I need to do to change it? And I'll give you an example. So just say you're competing and you're not scoring points for your team the way that you know that you can. And what actually happens is you actually get taken off the field or the court, whatever the sport is. And that's the result of what's going on right now, right? When you compete. So then, okay, I'm getting taken off because I'm not scoring points, I'm not performing well when I'm competing. That's the reason that I'm getting taken off and put back on the bench. Then you got to ask yourself a list of questions, and then you got to answer those. So I'll give you some examples of questions that you can ask yourself. Why am I not scoring the points? What is really the problem here? What's actually going on? Am I feeling the pressure to perform? Do I want to prove that I'm good enough? Do I want to prove that I'm good enough to me? Do I want to prove that I'm good enough for the team or my team? Do I want to prove that I'm good enough for the coaches or the coach? Am I putting so much pressure on myself that I'm not able to perform? Ask yourself that question. But you've got to ask yourself that question for each action that's actually going on, that you have identified that to know. You've got to keep asking yourself questions. List them out and then go, right, what is it that I need to do to answer them? Okay, so that's number 2. Number 3, devise a plan. So if you've been listening to me for quite some time, I always talk about creating a plan. We identify what the problem is, then we create a plan on how to solve it. So in this plan, what we need to be aware of, though, when we put the plan back in place, because we want to make sure that we're not hitting burnout, we want to make sure that we're working more quality practice and training versus quantity, and we want to make sure that we're doing everything, we've got the strategies in place that are actually going to help us accomplish the goals that we want, right? But we also need to make aware of when we put a plan together, we have to have 3 things in place in this plan, other than all the other things that you've got to do for your sport. You're like, oh, what? I've got more things I've got to worry about. No, actually, this is quite good, what I want you to be focusing on here. So in this plan, these 3 areas is, 1, I want you to take some time out. Because grinding it out, day in, day out, long hours, is not necessarily going to give you the result. So it's also good to actually take some time out. So take some time out through your week of what you're doing. Give yourself some recovery time, both physically and both mentally, because what you're doing is physically and mentally taxing, and you need that recovery time. Okay, so that's the first thing that you want to do. Take time out in part of our plan. So you've got to put that in your week, when I'm going to take some time out. Number 2, do something else. Do something completely different from what you're doing. Because you know what? Life is about having some fun too. Got to have some fun. That was a big thing that I didn't do. I didn't have fun when I was pursuing my career in sport. I've got to do this and it's the be-all end-all. Burnout. Got to do this. This is the be-all end-all. Burnout. Right? Because I didn't take time out. I waited until I hit exhaustion. I didn't go and do something else and have some fun and give myself a complete break. Again, that's recovery time, right? Important to do that. So it's a must. You've got to put these into your week somewhere. And the other one, the third thing of part of your plan, is sleep. Get some sleep. Because if you are well rested, then you can attack the next day with vigor. You've got that fire in your belly, right? You've recovered mentally. You've recovered physically. You're set to go. You're set to crush it. You're set to bring it on, right? You're set to bring out your best performances in practice, in training, and when you compete. If you are doing these things, having good rest, sleeping, taking time out, doing something else, giving yourself that mental break, right? Because there's no point going to a tournament, going to a match, competing, if you're totally exhausted and worn out before you begin. You're not going to perform anyway, are you? It's not going to work. You're just going to feel even more humiliated. So make sure you factor these areas, time out, doing something else, sleep, in part of your plan. Remember, you want to feel refreshed. Each day, you want to start the day feeling awesome, feeling ready to crush the day, okay? And number 4, what areas in your sport or in your mindset are you going to focus on improving? What are those areas that you're going to focus on improving now that you've identified what's not working? I want you to decide what they are, and then I want you to work on how you're actually going to put that in place, okay? So that's what we've got to make sure that we're doing. Now, if you're struggling with burnout and you don't get picked for the team, even though you work your butt off, you're not seeing the hard work pay off, you're not seeing the results in your sport, you're grinding it out every day and feel like you are focusing on the right things, but you're not performing well when it counts and you're finding it hard to stay motivated, then I've created a free training for you, the Successful Athlete Masterclass. I'm going to show you how to crush it under pressure, and it'll bring out your best performances when you compete. So all you need to do is go to www.tiffanymica, that's mika.com/Sam, SAM, and I look forward to seeing you there. I want you to dream big, believe in you, and go after your dreams.